Snow covered every rooftop, Christmas lights glowed across the neighborhood, families laughed inside warm homes, children opened presents, but I was standing outside, barefoot holding a small Christmas gift. My mother-in-law slowly closed the front door, looked at me through the glass, and calmly said, "You're not welcome here this Christmas." Then, she locked the door. I knocked once, twice, no one opened it. Through the window, I could see everyone sitting around the dinner table, laughing, eating. Pretending I didn't exist. I wasn't going to beg, I wasn't going to make a scene. I simply stood there in the snow waiting for my husband because he had no idea. His own mother had locked his wife outside. 10 minutes later, his car pulled into the driveway and everything changed. My name is Claire Morgan, my husband is Owen Morgan. We had been married for 3 years. Owen was the kindest person I'd ever met, patient, honest, hardworking. He owned a small architecture firm. I worked as a pediatric nurse. We didn't have a perfect life, but we had a peaceful one. The only person who never accepted me was Owen's mother, Judith Morgan. From the day we got engaged, she made one thing clear: I always imagined someone different for my son. She never shouted, never insulted me directly. Instead, she mastered something far more painful: polite cruelty at family dinners. She introduced everyone by name, then she'd point at me. "And this is Owen's wife." Claire, just Owen's wife. If I brought dessert, she'd say, "Oh, I already made something better." If I helped clean the kitchen, she'd quietly redo everything after I finished, always smiling, always pretending to be kind, which made it impossible for anyone else to notice except Owen. Whenever he confronted her, she always gave the same answer: I was only trying to help. First Christmas after getting married wasn't much better. Judith bought gifts for everyone: beautiful scarves, expensive watches, handmade ornaments. When it was my turn, she handed me a tiny envelope. Inside was a $10 coffee shop gift card. Everyone looked uncomfortable. I smiled anyway because I refused to ruin Christmas. On the drive home, Owen apologized. "I'm so sorry." I squeezed his hand. "You don't have to apologize for someone else's behavior." But deep inside, I wondered if things would ever change. The following year, nothing improved. Judith organized another family Christmas. She accidentally forgot to tell me dinner had been moved 2 hours earlier. When Owen and I arrived, everyone had already eaten. She simply smiled. "Oh, I guess there was a misunderstanding." Owen was furious, but she convinced everyone it had been an honest mistake. Again, I stayed quiet because I loved my husband more than I hated conflict. This Christmas felt different. Judith called me herself. "Claire, I'd really like us to start over." I was surprised. She continued. "Invited the whole family. I hope you'll come." The first time, she actually sounded sincere. When I told Owen, he smiled. I knew she'd come around. I wanted to believe him, so I spent the entire afternoon baking homemade cinnamon cookies. I wrapped gifts for every family member, even Judith. Inside her gift was a framed photo from our wedding, one where she was smiling beside us. I thought, maybe this Christmas could finally be different. Christmas Eve arrived. Owen had to stop by his office first. A client needed emergency blueprints before the holidays. "Only be 30 minutes behind you. Meet you at Mom's house." I kissed him goodbye. "Save you some cookies." I drove to Judith's house alone. The driveway was full, cars lined both sides of the street. Everyone was already inside. I picked up the gifts, walked to the front door, and rang the bell. Judith opened it. She looked at the presents in my hands, then at me. Her smile disappeared. I thought I made myself clear. I frowned. "What do you mean?" She stepped outside, quietly closed the door behind her so no one else could hear. Then she, "Don't want you ruining Christmas." I stared at her. "I don't understand." She folded her arms. "You don't belong in this family." "Never did." I felt my heart sink. "Judith," she interrupted me. "Owen only invited you because you're his wife. If it were up to me, you wouldn't be here." Then, she took one step backward, closed the front door, turned the lock, and left me standing outside. In the freezing snow, the cold wind grew stronger. Snow covered the gifts in my hands. I stood there, trying to understand what had just happened inside the house. I could hear laughter, Christmas music, children opening presents. Nobody knew I was standing outside. 5 minutes later, a car pulled into the driveway. It was Owen. He smiled as he got out of the car. Then he looked around, confused. "Claire." He couldn't see me at first. I was standing beside the porch, partly hidden by the snow. When he finally noticed me, his smile disappeared. "What are you doing out here?" I tried to force a smile. "It's okay. Let's just go home." He immediately knew something was wrong. "Claire, what happened?" Before I could answer, the front door opened. Judith appeared. "Oh, Owen, I didn't know you were here already." Owen looked at her, then back at me. "Why is my wife standing outside?" Judith shrugged. "She decided not to come in." I quietly shook my head. "That's not true." Judith quickly interrupted. Claire seemed upset. "I didn't want to pressure her." Owen frowned, looked directly at him. "She locked me outside." Driveway became completely silent. Judith laughed nervously. "Oh, please. Would I ever do that?" Owen slowly walked toward the front door. He reached for the handle. It didn't open. He looked down. The deadbolt was locked. He quietly asked, "Mom, was the door locked?" Judith hesitated. I always lock the door. Owen calmly replied no. Never lock it while guests are arriving. She couldn't answer just then. His younger sister Megan opened the door from inside. She looked confused. Owen, why are you all standing outside? Owen, Mom, tell everyone Claire decided not to come. Megan frowned. Yes, she told us Claire called and said she wasn't feeling well. I looked at Owen. I never called anyone. Megan's face turned pale. Relatives heard the conversation one by one. They walked toward the front door. His father, Richard, stepped outside. What's going on? Before anyone could answer, Judith quickly spoke. This is all a misunderstanding. But Owen had already noticed something, the Christmas gift still sitting in my hands covered in snow. He quietly asked, how long have you been standing out here? I answered honestly. About 25 minutes. His face changed completely. He took my freezing hands into his. They were ice cold, without saying a word. He removed his own winter coat, wrapped it around my shoulders, then he turned toward his mother. You left my wife outside. Christmas Eve. Judith folded her arms. Was protecting this family. Owen stared at her. Who? From someone who doesn't belong here. Those words echoed through the quiet street. Several relatives looked shocked. Richard slowly lowered his head. Martha, wait, no, Judith, he corrected himself. Judith, you really say that? She answered without shame. Yes, never believed she belongs in this family. Silence that followed felt endless. Then Owen did something nobody expected. He walked inside. Everyone thought he was coming back for dinner. Instead, he picked up every gift we had brought, the cookies Claire had baked, our overnight bags, even the framed wedding photo. He carried everything back outside. Judith looked confused. What are you doing? Owen looked directly at her. You made your choice. I'm making mine. She laughed. Be dramatic. It's Christmas. Owen calmly replied, exactly. My wife won't spend Christmas standing in the snow while everyone else eats dinner. Judith's smile disappeared. Really leave your own family? Owen took my hand. My family. He looked at me. Is already standing beside me. Then he turned toward everyone gathered at the door. I hope all of you have a wonderful Christmas. If my wife isn't welcome in this house, neither am I. Without another word, he walked me back to the car. I looked through the window one last time. Judith stood frozen on the porch. She truly believed Owen would come back inside. She had no idea. This Christmas was about to change her family forever. The drive home was completely silent. Snow continued falling outside the windshield. Neither of us spoke for almost 15 minutes. Finally, I quietly said, I'm sorry your Christmas ended like this. Owen looked at me. No, sorry, I kept believing things would change on their own. He sighed. I asked you to be patient for 3 years. Every year, my silence gave Mom permission to hurt you again. I reached for his hand. You stood beside me tonight. He nodded. I should have done it much sooner instead of going home. He turned into the parking lot of a small mountain hotel. I looked at him. What are we doing? He smiled. We're having our own Christmas. The receptionist had one room left, a small fireplace, a tiny Christmas tree, and a beautiful view of the snow-covered mountains. We ordered hot chocolate, opened the gifts we'd brought for each other, shared the cookies I'd baked for the first time that evening. I smiled. Owen looked at me. You know something? What? This is the happiest Christmas I've had in years. I laughed. So am I, sometimes. Peace is worth more than a perfect family dinner. The next morning, Owen's phone rang. It was his younger sister Megan. Owen, you need to know what happened after you left. He put the call on speaker the moment our car disappeared. The house became completely silent. Nobody touched the food. Nobody opened another present. Finally, Richard stood up. He looked directly at Judith. Defended you for years. What you did last night, I can't defend. Judith tried to explain. I was only protecting our family. Richard shook his head. No, you pushed our son away. You embarrassed your daughter-in-law. By one, the relatives began leaving. His older brother hugged Richard goodbye. We'll celebrate Christmas another day. Not like this. An aunt quietly said, Claire has always been kind to everyone. Can't believe this happened. Within 30 minutes, the house was almost empty. The Christmas dinner Judith had spent weeks preparing sat untouched on the table for the first time. She realized she hadn't won. She had lost. 3 days later, there was another knock on our front door. When I opened it, Richard was standing there. Beside him was Judith. She looked completely different. No makeup, no confident smile, just regret. Richard spoke first. We're not here to make excuses. We're here because someone owes you an apology. Judith slowly stepped forward. She couldn't even look me in the eyes. For 3 years, I convinced myself that if I treated you badly, my son would somehow love me more. I was wrong. She wiped away a tear. Night I locked you outside. I thought Owen would choose me. Instead, I finally understood something. You weren't taking my son away. My own actions were. She looked at Owen. I'm sorry. Then she turned toward me. Claire. I'm deeply sorry. I humiliated you. I lied to everyone. I treated you like an outsider, when all you ever wanted was to be part of this family. I remained quiet for a moment, then I answered honestly. Accept your apology. Trust isn't rebuilt in one conversation. It's rebuilt one choice at a time. Judith nodded. I understand. Earn it. Over the following months, things slowly changed. Judith stopped giving unwanted opinions. She called before visiting. She apologized whenever she made a mistake. She treated me with respect, not because Owen demanded it, because she finally understood why it mattered. The following Christmas, she invited us again this time. I wasn't sure if we should go. Owen looked at me. Decision is yours. After thinking for a long time, I said yes when we arrived. Judith opened the front door herself. She smiled then, without saying a word. She handed me a small silver key. I looked confused. What's this? She smiled through tears. It's the new front door key. Never want you to wonder again whether you're welcome here. I looked at the key, then at her. Sometimes the smallest gift carries the biggest apology. That Christmas, we all sat at the same table. Nobody argued, nobody competed. When dinner ended, Richard raised his glass. To family, he smiled at me, and to never leaving anyone outside again. Everyone nodded as Owen squeezed my hand under the table. I realized something. The greatest revenge isn't watching someone lose, it's refusing to become bitter. While they learn from the pain they caused, sometimes the door that once closed on you opens again, not because you begged to come back, but because they finally understood. You should never have been left outside in the first place.